friends, my name is Bond, this is Oleg, and in today's video we're going to do a review of a Squale Diver. We have two Squale watches in for the review today. They are of the same model and they have identical specs, they only differ in finish and in the bracelet. So what are the specs? Well, the watch has 42mm diameter, it's about 48.7mm from one lug to another. It has a lug opening of 20mm and the watch is only 12.7mm thick. The case is made out of stainless steel. It has a flat piece of sapphire crystal with AR coating on the underside, 500 meters of water resistance, powered by the Sellita SW200-1 automatic movement, and it costs about 900 USD. I'm gonna come right out and say it, my favorite variation out of the two is the matte blasted finished one. I think it works better with overall theme of the watch. It also makes the watch look more tactical, just a better choice overall. However, my personal preference is not everyone's personal preference. That's why I also wanted to feature this high polished case. The polishing on the case is done competently. There are no brushed finishes, so everything you see here is high polish. One of the cool different features of this watch and why this watch really plays with the light really well is that high polish accent around the bezel. So you see that bezel insert there, and all around it you have this high polish, highly reflective surface. I quite like that. Although I'm not a big fan of all polished cases, this little accent piece I quite enjoy. Other than the difference in terms of case finishing between the two variations, everything else is pretty much the same. The case shape is the same. One cool thing that I noticed about this case shape, it has angular case shape on the side where the crown is, and has a rounded off case shape on the opposite side. Kind of an interesting choice, haven't seen that before, so the case is not exactly symmetrical, which kind of makes sense because the crown throws off the symmetry of the case either way. Speaking of the crown is at the 4 o'clock position. It's kind of recessed into the case. It's a screw down crown signed with the Squale logo. Even though I really like this look with the crown recessed into the case, and it makes sense functionally, the crown is out of the way, you're not going to bump it on anything. In operating the crown, you do have some trade-offs. It's not as easy to unscrew and operate this crown, so that is a bit of a negative. Just be aware if you're buying this watch, especially if you have big sausage fingers like me. Moving on to the bezel of the watch, it's a 120 click unidirectional bezel action. The bezel action is actually quite good. Take a listen. Very firm tactile clicks. However, there are a couple of negatives with this bezel action. Number one, there is a bit of play on it. It's not too bad, but it could be tightened up. The second negative, on one of the watches, on the matte blasted finished one, the bezel doesn't line up perfectly. It's not as bad as some of the other watches that I've seen, but quality control issues are never a good thing to see in a watch for around $1,000. In this video, I'm featuring 2021 model of this watch, and there are a few differences between 2021 and 2020 model of this watch. I like that Squale is listening to their customers' feedback and is trying to make these small improvements to the watch. A couple of improvements slash differences to note between 2021 and 2020 model. The case is larger, slightly larger, I should add. It's 42mm in diameter as opposed to 41mm on the previous version of this watch. On the wrist, it wears really well. I think it was a good choice to go with a slightly larger case, even though I am usually advocating for smaller cases on diver watches. I think in this case it really works because the watch looks so good on the wrist. It kind of does a bit of a disappearing act where it doesn't really wear like a 42mm. In my opinion, this wears like a 41, maybe even a 40mm. So really happy with a slight increase in the diameter. I think 41 might have been a little bit too small for a watch like this. The second difference slash improvement to note is the bezel action. So now they have 120 click unidirectional bezels as opposed to previous versions that had 60 click unidirectional bezels. Now, I never experienced that bezel action. From my understanding, it was a very satisfying bezel action. However, it had a little bit too much play, and even though this 120 click bezel still has a bit of play, it's not nearly as bad as that 60 click. So that is a good improvement overall. The third difference is with the buckle. You can see that this watch comes with your choice of either a mesh bracelet, which is pretty excellent by the way, I am myself not a big fan of mesh bracelets, but I know they have their place in a watch collection. This one here has something that I've never seen before. To adjust the length of this bracelet, you have these separate, almost like links that are held together with pins. Very interesting design, and the overall size and heft of this bracelet is very satisfying. It's quite thick and girthy to match the ruggedness of the case. What I don't like about this mesh strap is that the buckle is done in high polish. Even though it matches the case finishes of the watch, which kind of makes sense, that high polished buckle is going to get scratched up in no time. And that's actually one of the big differences between 2020 and 2021 version of this watch. The rubber strap version of this watch in a matte finished case comes with a matte finished buckle, which it didn't in the previous version. So previous version of this watch, the buckle was actually high polished, even though the case was matte blasted. Now the buckle is matte blasted, which matches the overall tone of the case, but it also matches the overall theme of the watch. Go anywhere, do anything type of a timepiece. I mean, 500 meters of water resistance. Do you really need that? Probably not, but it is cool to have. And coming from a brand like Squale, I do actually believe that this watch comes with 500 meters of water resistance. I mean, Squale used to make cases for Blancpain, so they are no strangers to engineering a good water resistant case. Speaking of Blancpain and kind of callbacks to their vintage heritage, Squale was heavily inspired, should I say, by a Blancpain 50 Fathoms military 3H band watch. It's not a hugely popular watch out there, but this dial design and dial overall layout is heavily inspired by that watch. The dial has a matte finish to match the overall military aesthetic of the watch. It has nice and big painted on indices, and these big indices give a lot of surface area for the lume to be applied. Hashes for the seconds running track around the dial. I quite enjoy the set of hands on this watch. I like that highlighted minutes hand because, of course, when you go diving, the minutes are what's really important. And I also really enjoy that they went with minimum branding on this watch. So it only has one Squale logo on the dial. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Squale as a brand, you might say, well, how many logos should it really have? You'd be surprised, but a lot of these watches have two Squale logos on the dial, which is a bit weird and kind of throws off the overall symmetry of the dial. So instead of having the second logo by the 6 o'clock position, now it says automatic and 500 meters in its place. Then all the way at the bottom there, Swiss made. Now, while we're on the subject of over-branding too many Squale logos, another difference to note between this 2021 version of the watch and the earlier versions of this watch, it doesn't have any branding on this side of the case. That's a good thing. Some of the older versions of this watch did have Squale signed case, and the Squale signature was on the side of the case, similar to Invicta watches. Not my favorite thing, and I'm really glad that they changed it for this model year. Squale watches for many years were powered by ETA movements, but now that Swatch Group is really tightening down who can use their movements, Squale has switched to Sellita movements. The watches we have in hand today are powered by the Sellita SW200-1 movement. I'm not sure if the movement is regulated or not, but both watches are super accurate, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear that Squale does at least some degree of regulation with their movements. The last thing that I want to highlight that's different between this version of the watch and the earlier versions of the same watch is the packaging that the watch comes in. I did an unboxing video. It's a short video on the YouTube channel, so check it out. You can see the whole unboxing experience for this watch, and that video will be linked in the description below. Also in the description below is a link to Russell Jewelers. They are a family-run business and a local AD of Squale watches. I think they're the only Squale watches AD in whole Canada, and they do Canada-wide shipping. So if you're looking for one of these watches, check out their website, and a huge thank you to them for letting me borrow these timepieces. So now that I've had some time to spend with these timepieces, what do I think about them? I personally don't have too much experience with Squale watches. I only reviewed one other Squale watch in the 4 years that I've been reviewing watches on YouTube, and I like it. I think this watch offers quite a bit of value for a pretty reasonable price. I also like the fact that they have rich history and actually experience in making cases for a lot of other well-established watch brands. In my opinion, it adds something special to this watch brand. Now, in terms of the styling of this watch, we've seen quite a few of these vintage inspired cases and dials from a lot of other micro brands and established brands in the past few years. I think what Squale is doing here is a little bit different because they're drawing inspiration from their own experience from some of their own vintage watches, which is really cool and different in this under $1,000 price point space. So I quite enjoyed my time with Squale. I'm looking forward to reviewing more Squale watches in the future. And leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about Squale watches. Do you have any in your collection? Are you looking forward to getting any of them? What Squale watch should I review next? Also, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We release new videos every week. By the way, today on my wrist, I'm wearing my Rolex GMT Master 2. I did a full review of this watch as well as an unboxing video for the watch. Both of those videos will be linked in the description below. Also in the description below there is a secret link and there's a link to bondnailstraps.com. Check those out if you're curious. Thanks for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had fun and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. I'm gonna take you for a walk. It's finally nice weather. It finally stopped raining. I know, I'm happy about that too. We can even go to the park and play with the stick if you want. We can play catch. Your favorite. Yeah.